Okay, so this is for the second part of our group 3 presentation for challenging conversations. And we just wanted to go over some of our talking points. Um, and we're going to start with the diversity and oppression talking point. So it was really interesting with this project because, when we were coming up with our scenario and our role play, we were having a little bit of difficulty trying to figure out or identify, ways in which we could discuss this, or how we could identify these issues within the context of our scenario. So when you consider the ideas of diversity and oppression, we noted the following things in our scenario. So as we stated in the introduction, we have in our scenario, the cultural context is that we have a heterosexual Caucasian family. We found that this family has very traditional familial roles. So very much that nuclear family with the mom, the dad, and the children, with the dad taking on that leadership role, that patriarch, and being very, hard line about the rules and them being followed. So we noted those gender specific roles within the family. And when we really tried to consider those things and how they might take shape as the family interacts, it both in the home and outside of the home, we also considered how the roles might change in certain settings. How do the roles change between parents when they're in therapy? How comfortable does dad feel trying to shift from that classic patriarchal role into a more emotionally grounded, less masculine type force within his home. And so we considered, just what that shifting might look like and how that might um, affect the family as a whole as they progress through their process in therapy. We also considered the protective factors that are at play in the interactions between dad and daughters, and just how that might affect the daughters as they're going through their own development stages. We found, again, that these gender roles were very important, and you could definitely see how they, are at work within that context of that family dynamic. So that is our diversity and oppression talking points. And I did want to add one last thing to that. I forgot. We noted, and I think Ashley actually mentioned this at one point during our discussion about this. We noted that the way that the family interacted or continues to interact is actually important because we want to make sure that dad is being honored in his ability to move out of that masculine role. Did I say that right, Ashley?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So that's anything else you guys want to add to these talking points?
I think
No,
that's
you hit the
great.
nail on the head for us,
Don't think
Becca.
so.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. And this
So
would be, yes,
go ahead.
this would be JC.
Yes. So we utilize the common ground method as one of the methods to work through our conflict. This mainly takes focus of when two people are having a disagreement to come to a place where they can get the needs met from both sides. There's a mediator, and it's important that it's just active listening. So as for what Ed and I were doing, him as the dad and me as the daughter, me just really taking that time to actively listen to his concerns and to be able to repeat that back to him in an accurate manner. Just taking the time to listen rather than sit and think of what a comeback is going to be and, focusing on how am I going to respond to this. You really want to take the time, actively listen to what someone else is saying, and then repeat back so that they feel, heard and justified in what they're saying. Did you guys have anything to add or?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think one of the components of the common ground was heavy on the reflective listening. And I just think that that is so important, not just in this technique, but just in general when we consider communication. I just love how powerful of a tool that is because oftentimes, especially with myself, I notice that I'm not always reflective listening. I'm not always listening to listen or really listening to somebody. So I just think it's a great tool to really make sure you're understanding, connecting with the person you're trying to talk to.
Absolutely. Yes.
And just to add briefly to that, the reason why we chose to use that with JC being the younger sibling is because even young children know when you're
Mhm.
listening, and so
And it
that's
was
one of
a simpler like method for
the.
a
Mhm.
younger sibling to understand as opposed to the next method that we
Yeah.
used.
All right. And so we also used the nonviolent communication technique in our scenario. This is Dr. Marshall Rosenberg's communication technique to help mediate conflicts. As noted in our reading earlier this semester, there are 4 components and 2 parts. So, number 1 is observation. So that's observing and noticing concrete things that are happening in the present moment versus evaluating and judging. 2, feelings is the second component. That's important because we need to distinguish feelings from thoughts, which can actually be kind of difficult for people.
Mhm.
3 is needs. So it's just understanding that all of us, every human has a need, and seeing where needs are or are not being met. 4 is requests. So that's making a clear request. Again, that can be met in the present moment, which is always a big factor, versus making a demand, which usually isn't as effective. The 2 parts are empathy and honesty. Empathy just allows us to understand the other person and trying to figure out what their needs are. And again, it helps us stay in the present with them. While being honest is like I would say kind of a self empathy. It's allowing us to understand ourselves and connect with a person in the present moment by noticing our needs and kind of breaking down our walls. So we're able to connect with them. We use that in our scenario mainly between Becca and Dad, with Mom kind of guiding us through, especially Becca, with identifying all of those important pieces.
Right, right. And springboarding off of that, I'm just going to tease apart a little bit of our role play, how we hit these points in NVC between Becca and Dad. For one, Becca was able to identify her request to take her sister on the trip has been denied 3 times. So just that specific of I asked 3 times, all 3 times I've just been told no, and that's it, was identifying here's the concrete observation about what's going on. And then Mom helped her to understand what her feelings are in this moment by expressing that she felt frustrated, irritated, and not heard, which gave the parents a moment to say, okay, well, can you explain to us what not being heard means so we can know how to meet that need? So then Becca was able to make a clear request that she just wants to know her parents' reasonings for not letting JC go on these trips instead of the just no, that's it. So Dad was able to meet this request in the moment by explaining some of the reasoning behind their wanting to keep JC back. So we were able to hit all 4 points of NVC between the 2 of them. And again, we chose to use that because Becca is the high schooler. She's developing into her own adult, is able to understand some more of these concrete types of communication. Whereas with the common ground, again, we use that between JC and Dad because it's a much more simpler technique. And with JC being in middle school, we felt it was more realistic that the 2 of them might try to do this with Mom's help.
Yeah.
So JC was able to express her feelings. And as we saw, it didn't go perfectly by any means, and it's not going to in a real family situation. But they were able to get through a point where both of them felt heard, which comes back to the pointed listening that Becca was talking about, that the reflective listening, that even a toddler can tell if Mom or Dad is paying attention to them or not. So this comes back down to one of the basic practices that we need to have as social workers is taking that time to have reflective listening to make sure we're present with our clients or whoever.
Thanks, Ashley and JC. And so the last talking point is just about how we kind of progress through the different group stages. And I actually really, I really enjoyed this part of the assignments all semester, actually, because I think just like in the case of the nonviolent communication, how I really felt like I had a better understanding of it by the time we finished doing our role play scenario.
Yeah.
Having to consistently evaluate what group stage I was in with my group helped me to get a better understanding of the group stages. Cause you know, every time I had to write a progress note, I'm like, wait, what stage are we in? What does this look like? But yeah, we all pretty much came to the consensus that we really we didn't encounter a chaos stage or like a heavy conflict stage amongst us. You know, personality wise, I think we all kind of worked together. I didn't encounter any personal issues with anybody, and none of my peers in the group reported that either. Although I'll let them, you know, speak to their experience. But as a group, you know, we discussed this before we did our presentation, and we all really feel like by the end we have come into a full community. And I don't feel like it took us long to get to that place. I feel like by maybe like the third week, we were rolling right into that community phase, and learning kind of just to work very cohesively. So that's my experience and my belief about where we're at in our group stages. You guys have anything to add?
No, absolutely. I feel like we did a really good job navigating through some pieces. I know that Ed the other day in one of our group meetings you mentioned about the chaos. If you wanted to elaborate on your interpretation of chaos, that was enjoyable to look at things that way.
Yeah, I thought I noticed chaos one week, and it wasn't due to like any of our interactions with each other or anyone's behavior in the group. It was more of the we can say the environment, the stress of our schoolwork and us talking about are we doing things right, you know, with our modules, etc. So that was the only time I noted chaos. Other than that, I definitely think we operated as a community. Everyone was super respectful. Everyone felt comfortable sharing and speaking up, and I think all of us were comfortable letting people step in as the leader. So we kind of got to vacillate between leadership and group member roles really smoothly.
Definitely. And I just want to also point out that all four of us operate in leadership roles in our jobs outside of school. And so there was a real opportunity to butt heads. And we did a little dance in the beginning of just figuring out, okay, who's going to lead this part? Who's going to lead that part? But we did manage to figure out that dance of leadership and group member. And I think that says a lot about how we've ended up in the community group stage.
Yeah.
And everybody has an off day or, you know, an off night. So it's nice to know that like you're working with 3 other people that can pick up slack on a day you might not be feeling it. So I think that's what worked for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that is our challenging conversations presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.